We now start to enjoy yet another masterpiece, yet another fairy tale. Of all the fairy tales in this series, Flaubert's novel, Madame Bovary, is the most romantic. Stylistically, it is prose doing what poetry is supposed to do. A child to whom you read a story may ask, is the story true? And if not, the child demands the truth. Let us not persevere in juvenile attitude. Of course, if somebody tells you that Mr. Smith has seen a blue saucer with a green operator whiz by, you do ask, is it true? Because in one way or another, the fact of it being true would affect your whole life, would be of infinite practical consequence to you. But do not ask whether a poem or a novel is true. Let us not kid ourselves. Let us remember that literature is of no practical value whatsoever, except in the very special case of somebody wishing to become, of all things, a professor of literature. The girl Emma Bovary never existed. The book Madame Bovary shall exist forever and ever. A book lives longer than a girl. The book is concerned with adultery and uncontent situations and illusions that shocked the brutish Philistine government of Napoleon III. Indeed, the novel was actually tried in a court of justice for obscenity. Just imagine that, as if the work of an artist could ever be obscene. I am glad to say that Flaubert won this case. That was exactly 100 years ago. In our days, our times, but that we shall discuss Madame Bovary as it was intended it to be discussed, in terms of structures, movements as it termed them, thematic lines, style, poetry, and characters. The novel consists of 35 chapters, each about 10 pages long, and is divided into 3 parts set respectively in Rouen and Tostes, in Yonville and in Yonville, Rouen and Yonville, all of these places invented except Rouen, a cathedral city in northern France. The main action is supposed to take place in the 1830s and 1840s under King Louis Philippe. 1830-1848. Chapter 1 begins in the winter of 1827, and in a kind of afterword, the lives of some of the characters are followed up till 1856 into the reign of Napoleon III, and indeed up to the date of Flaubert's completing the book. Madame Bovary is begun at Pochard, near Rennes, on the 19th of September 1851, finished in April 1856, sent out in June, and published serially at the end of the same year in the Revue de Paris. 100 miles to the north of Rouen, Charles Dickens in Boulogne was finishing Bleak House in the summer of 1853 when Flaubert had reached part 2 of his novel. 1 year before that, in Russia, Gogol had died and Tolstoy had published his first important work, Child. 3 forces make and mold a human being: heredity, environment, and the unknown agent acts. Of these, the second, environment, is by far the least important, while the last, agent acts, is by far the most influential. In the case of characters living in books, it is of course the author who controls, directs, and applies these 3 forces. The society around Madame Bovary has been manufactured by Flaubert as deliberately as Madame Bovary herself has been made by him, and to say that this Flaubertian society acted upon that Flaubertian character is to talk in circles. Everything that happens in the book happens exclusively in Flaubert's mind, no matter what the initial trivial impulse may have been, and no matter what conditions in the France of his time existed or seemed to him to exist. This is why I am opposed to those who insist upon the influence of objective social conditions upon the heroine Emma Bovary. Flaubert's novel deals with the delicate calculus of human fate, not with the arithmetic of social conditioning. We are told that most of the characters in Madame Bovary are bourgeois, but one thing that we should clear up once and for all is the meaning that Flaubert gives to the term bourgeois. I mean, it simply means townsman, as it often does in French.
The term bourgeois, as we refer to others, means Philistine, people preoccupied with the material side of life and living on the convention. Whenever you use the word bourgeois, then the different Marxist connotation. The other bourgeois is a stated word.